Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Affecting midnight, that is, as the morning dawned here in this hemisphere, WTO was laid to rest. It met its demise. It's no more. The US trade offensive against WTO for its biased judgments as a global arbiter has come to an end. From today onwards, WTO's appellate body has become dysfunctional since it's no longer having sufficient quorum to conduct its business. This Supreme Court for resolution of the trade disputes is fully cremated, buried, and what action President Trump initiated 2 years back have come to fruition today because for one simple reason that the USA has blocked the appointments and the replacements of the judges. And there is no remedy in sight that this body can be revived. Now, what are going to be the repercussions? For many countries, Canada, India, England, and for the whole world. One thing is definite, that now it would be the trade, disputes would be solved by negotiations between the parties rather than being superimposed, the decision being superimposed by an outside body. If India and USA have a dispute, they have to sit across the table and decide. Luckily, NAFTA was ratified yesterday, a day before, and that meets Canada and as far as North American trade is concerned. But Canada suffers as far as trade with India, trade with China. The two major trading partners are there. There are still no clear agreements. India's dispute with Canada regarding the pulses is still hanging fire. With China regarding pork, regarding canola oil, is still in the balance. USA and China are in fact in sync now. I feel their game has been played very shrewdly, keeping the whole world in dark. And these two countries have practically divided the hemisphere in their spheres of influence. England, after the Brexit, it is at the mercy of EU because the majority of the trade of England is with EU. And now WTO cannot intervene in the trade wars. Thereby, the whole future of the globalization is in balance. As a matter of fact, because of the American action, is unable to take any decision. So, who would be the arbiter? The global trade arbiter would be power of the countries involved. And the weaker country would automatically suffer. Let's be very clear. Since it's no longer going to be played. I'm no lover of globalization. I'm no advocate for WTO, and I know WTO has been playing nasty games at times. It was influenced. It had partial interest at heart. It was never honest. But still, there were some rules that were adhered to. Now it will not be the rules which decide the trade issues. It shall be the power. Who is more powerful? He shall be able to dictate. Earlier, there was some semblance because the trade subsidies were sometimes approved, sometimes not approved. But now they'll be approved only if the power permits you to do it. And if I see that the US Trade Counselor, Stephen Wong, has very clearly stated that the future negotiations shall be settled by the future trade issues shall be settled by the negotiations. And the first major negotiation would be China and USA. On the other side, the sanctions that are imposed by USA or various countries would no longer be subject to the review by the World Trade Body. So economic relations would be based on power, not on rules, howsoever skewed, howsoever partial, howsoever imperfect these rules were. So the crippling nature of the settlement dispute would also play a major role in opening markets. As a matter of fact, it was in a state of coma since 2015. We talk only of 2 years when Trump stopped appointments. And he said, no, he will not appoint anybody because WTO is dishonest. But if I remember correctly, this WTO club of 164 countries has not produced any international accord since 2015. It abandoned the Doha round negotiations in 2015. I remember when Prime Minister Harper came back from Doha, we had a meeting and I told Prime Minister, I said, Mr. Prime Minister, what you have done today would have great implications because Prime Minister Harper was the only sane voice at the Doha conference, the only sane voice. And his predictions and his guidance and his sayings are coming out true. He very clearly stated that until and unless the Doha round can look after the interest of the weaker, can provide a level playing field, can ensure that the might is not right, but right is might, WTO would meet its normal death. And that's what has happened. So since 2015, no international accord has been produced by WTO. And look at the expenditure. Look at the expenses that they are incurring. The whole secretariat of WTO, representing 164 countries, is a white elephant, and it's the members who are footing the bill. Now, the trade restrictive measures among the G20 countries are at a historic height today. I mean, these countries manipulate rules and some or the other control the negotiation. And that might of the G20 is compounded by America First agenda and the trade war with China. Now, I'm not objecting to the individual countries protecting their own rights. But then let's be honest. Why talk of globalization and why talk of the level playing field? If Gambia is going to be exploited by China, if China is going to intervene on Bolivia and Brazil and in Panama and buying hectares and hectares of land in African countries, thereby establishing colonies indirectly. So that's what I call it neocolonialism. Then why have the facade of WTO and globalization to cover their nefarious activities? As a matter of fact, WTO is no longer fit for the purpose of being the final and the supreme arbiter. As a matter of fact, it's a need of reforms going beyond fixing the appeals mechanism. This was just a sheer mechanism for appeals. You go, you appeal, sometimes you can make your appeal successful, sometimes you cannot. But there was no inherent intrinsic jurisprudence guiding these trade resolutions. There were no set rules. It was the whims and the caprices of the judges. And for the developed countries in particular, WTO rules should have changed on account of the state-controlled enterprises, but they did not. If you remember in 2017, Japan brought together USA and European Union in a joint bid on the new global task of the state subsidies and forced technology transfers. Forced. It was the initiative of Japan that smoothed the way for relationship between European Union and USA to fructify in forced technology transfers so that the technology could be used for the good of the humanity at large and not remain the close preserve of some countries. But USA is pushing to limit the ability of WTO members to grant themselves developing status. The biggest problem has been these developing countries. They wanted to develop and they wanted the developed countries to support them. Openly and as a matter of show, these developed countries were showing a lot of consideration, lot of love, human values to help the developed countries progress. But in reality, they didn't want that to happen. For the simple reason, they were the markets for the developed countries. And if these developing countries became developed themselves, where would the developed countries sell? This was an economic problem for the developed countries. So they had to combine their humanistic values with the economic gains. So the developed countries, developing countries, including Singapore and Israel and China, came in the focus. Now, by no stretch of imagination can you say that Israel and Singapore are developing. They are much ahead of other countries. So Trump's purpose was that the USA ends concession to the developing countries as they were not appropriate. Now, here is the honesty of the man. He says, okay, they say that they want the developing countries to progress, but reality they don't want. Okay, I don't want it. So why should I put on a mask, a facade to say that I want to help them? No. If they want to help them, let them help themselves. I'm more concerned that my companies, my country's organizations are able to dump the material over there. And the same thing was being done by China. Even one road, the Silk Road, the new Silk Road, is an euphemism for extending trade which originates from China, not a bilateral trade. Now, let's be very clear. No developed countries is interested in multilateral or bilateral trade. They are willing to sell their goods and purchase and services and purchase something which is of lesser value. So the total gross value is more important. So the trouble was that WTO needed reforms and needed consensus. And that was not there. Chinese, USA, any country, any developed country did not want a consensus because of their personal interest. So what did these countries do? America said America first. China published its own reform proposals with a list of grievances against US actions. So the WTO was in a state of suspended animation, if not coma. So it faced a pivotal moment, and the trade ministers gathered in. They want to push through multinational deals. That's going to happen next year, possibly. But then, even if they push it, this fishing deal, fishing subsidies, this is not going to happen. You can cut subsidies, say what America gives or Canada gives to the fishermen. But then, do their local politics, would it permit them to happen? Would the Alaskan fish farmers, or Nunavut fish farmers, or British Columbia, or any fish farmer permit the political leadership to take away their subsidy? It won't happen. It's not that WTO will say fish. No, nothing is going to happen. And WTO's main farm having been taken, as I said, it is in a state of comatose position, suspended animation, and it's time that we give it a decent burial and bid goodbye to this institution which has played no good role ever. And the sooner we do it and put an end to uncertainty and tell the developing countries, okay, the field is open, you develop at your own cost, at your own risk, and as a result of your negotiations with the developing countries, or develop your human capital and then develop your economy. That's a way out. India, Canada, England, the countries which are much ahead, and these are the countries which need to take proactive action today because they are at the cusp of a change and they cannot depend on this institution which is in a coma or which is nearing burial to help them in any way. Thank you.